Hello, my name is Amber, and I had a near-death experience on November 4th of 2018. So before I had this near-death experience, my life felt like it was falling apart. I was going through a hard time financially. I had lost my job. I felt like I was facing like a dead end everywhere I turned. I was having a lot of negative thoughts, and I was feeling like I was in the lowest place of my life. And so leading up to November 4th, I have asthma, and I've had asthma since I was a child because I got double pneumonia when I was a newborn, and I also almost died from that experience. I guess I've just had more weak lungs, and if I get sick, I normally get asthma. And so I had gotten very sick. It was kind of a mystery illness. The sickness that I had was a cold, but it was extreme heaviness on my chest. I didn't feel like I could breathe or catch my breath, and it was getting worse and worse and worse, and I was having a severe asthma flare-up. So I was going to see lung specialists. I was going to the emergency room and getting oxygen, and I ended up getting pumped up with steroids. I think I was on 60 milligrams of steroids. And I ended up going in and out of the hospital, and I was home with my own breathing machine. And I truly felt like this was the end. I didn't know how I was going to get out of this experience and out of this asthma flare-up, because I have never experienced anything so severe in my life. And I couldn't walk. I couldn't talk. I was in bed for weeks and weeks and weeks. And it was one night when I was not even sleeping. I was up all night trying to very much focus on my breath and very much try to take deep breaths so that I could feel that I could breathe. And granted, I had a breathing machine and everything like that, but it just wasn't working. And so I was alone that night, and I was in my room, and it was probably around 1:30 in the morning. And all of a sudden I got to a point where my whole chest felt like it was just closing in on me, and I was gasping for air, and I get a little emotional thinking about it. So I was praying like I have never prayed before to my grandmother in spirit. And my grandmother and I were very close when she was alive, and I was praying for her. And all of a sudden, a white silhouette, kind of like a hazy energy, came through the doors of my bedroom. It was my grandmother, and she came over to me in my bed, and she energetically laid her hands over my forehead and then laid her hands on my chest. And I felt that she was breathing into me and for me. I kind of started to just feeling relieved at that moment. I wasn't even thinking too much about what was happening right in the beginning, because I was desperate to breathe. And so when I felt like my chest was opening and that I started to breathe, I was just grateful. And all of a sudden, this big energy came into the room. It was the energy took up my whole body. The energy I could feel was bigger than my room, as tall as my ceilings. It filled the universe. And this was Archangel Michael. And his presence was so strong. It was just 1,000% him. It was like a knowing. Everything at this point started to be very much a telepathic thought transfer. And so when he was there, then all of a sudden Mother Mary came. Now, Mother Mary, she anchored the space in love. I never felt like she was the one communicating with me, but she anchored the space in love. And again, that was also a knowing. So everything also was happening simultaneously. It was like time was slowing down, and I felt it was eternity, even at that time. And so they started to come surround me. Mother Mary, Archangel Michael, and my grandmother, they surrounded my body lying on the bed. And I felt again like they were energetically putting their hands over my body, and they started to breathe for me, all three of them together. And as they were breathing into my chest, I was lifting up off the bed, and then I would go back down on the bed, and like my chest would open. And at some point, my my mind started to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and my body started to get smaller and smaller and smaller, until all of a sudden I was looking down on myself. And I said to them in my consciousness, I guess everything was telepathic. And I said, I thought you were here to save me, and now I'm dying. Now I'm leaving my body, because I was traveling also through what it felt like was this tunnel of darkness. It wasn't completely dark. It had a warm feeling. It had like a pink and an orange glow, but it was also dark. And so I was saying this to them as I was traveling, what felt like I was traveling in my mind, and at the same time looking down at my body. And so I said, I thought you were saving me, and now I'm dying. And they started to talk to me as I was moving through what it felt like time and space into this tunnel. And Archangel Michael was the one who I felt was doing most of the talking. And he was starting to show me the experiences in my life and my mindset. I felt that I was right back in the mindset or in the emotional experience of this hard time I was going through. And at the same time, he was showing me the higher meaning and the higher purpose around it. And he said, you are not defined by your thoughts and feelings. You are not your mind. You are an unlimited, omnipotent being. You are unlimited consciousness, and we are bestowing upon you this miraculous healing, this divine intervention, so that you can see the power that you have, because you are one part of a whole of this unlimited consciousness, which is source. And as he was talking to me, I could see that they were performing this miraculous healing by what it felt like was energy going into my lungs. And they were asking me to release my guilt, to release my sorrow, to release my anger. I had gone through a divorce and I was remarried, but I had a lot of guilt around my divorce. I had a lot of shame around my financial situation that I was in at that moment. I wasn't able to take care of my children fully. I had to ask for help. And so I had stored all this emotional trauma in my chest. It must have been part of the asthma that I was feeling. And they were asking me to release. And they were asking me to receive. And then they started to tell me that I am not my body, that I am boundless, that we are all boundless, that we are all unlimited again in consciousness, and that our true essence is this unlimited state of consciousness, this omnipotent power that we have within us that is source. And then he started to tell me that now I'm going to become one with source, become one with God, so that I could feel what it was like to actually be the source that I stem from, that I am part of, that is within me, that we are all connected to. And so as he was explaining to me these words, the words vibrationally infused into me, and it became an embodiment. And then at one point, I asked my grandmother, who I knew was with me in this realm, which felt to be in another level of consciousness. It felt that I was in an expanded state of consciousness, that was what the afterlife is. That was this realm that I was in. It was the realm of our soul. It was weird because I was having a full conversation the whole time. I was asking questions to my Archangel Michael and to my grandmother. And I said, Grandma, how is this happening? And she said, because you are my twin flame. You are my twin soul. We are never separate. We are always connected. Then Archangel Michael, he brought me to an energetic force, a divine force that was almost felt like a ball of light, but it was more than that. It was the center of my consciousness, and it was God. And I became one with God. I became one with source. And as I became one with this, I had infused into me, or activated, I should say, my divine presence. And I had the feeling of euphoria, the feeling of bliss, the feeling of eternity, and the feeling of the universe within me and me within the universe. And they said that we are the universe. We are one part of a whole. Our true state is never in separation from this aspect of divinity that is within us, that we are this spark of divinity. And so as they showed me this feeling, Archangel Michael was still talking to me, and he told me that they're going to come to me for 3 nights, and that I am going to go back to my body, and that this first night was a reckoning. This first night was almost the information and the knowledge for me to understand why and where I was so off track in my life, so out of center, so out of this state of divinity that, we all are. Again, they had showed many areas of my life where I felt that I was defined by my thoughts. I was defined by my mind. I was defined by my feelings. And that if I thought something or if I felt something, that was who I am. That was my experience. I didn't know how to go beyond the circumstances I was in. I didn't know how to access that higher power, that omnipotent, unlimited presence that is unlimited possibilities. They talked a lot about unlimited possibilities and how I was defining myself based on the limited beliefs that I felt about myself or that others placed on me. And they told me that when someone does onto me a limited belief, that I can bless them with love and I can let it go. They explained to me this greater awareness that was around thoughts and feelings. Again, we are not defined by them, that there is this greater power within that we have, and not to dictate my life in that limited mindset, in that limited belief system. So Archangel Michael said to me, this first night was a reckoning, and that it was, this miraculous healing that they were doing to me to heal my body and to really expand my consciousness and expand my awareness. And that they would come to me for a second night, and that would be an awakening, and that they would come to me for a third night, and that would be a rebirth. And so as I started to travel in my awareness back to my body, and it felt like I was moving through time and space. It felt that I was traveling through these realms and dimensions, is the only way I can describe it, but with my awareness, because I wasn't at all in my body. And when I wasn't in my body, it felt like I was light as a feather, like I was free, like I was completely free from the confines of the human body. And so as I started to travel back into my body, they started to explain to me that our consciousness is stored in our energy centers in our body, in our chakras, and that they were going to drop my awareness back in my body through my chakra system, starting at the top of my head. And as they dropped my awareness into my crown chakra first, I started to feel the color of that energy and the feeling and what was kind of stored in that chakra. And then it was like this drop in from the top of my head down, 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 and through each chakra, I was reassimilated back into my body until my spirit became back into my body. And they said to me, focus on the stillness. And there was a gentle swirl of wind around my body. And they said, meditate on the stillness. And then all of a sudden, I was just back in my body. And I kind of shot up out of bed and started to cry because it was the most incredible experience of my life. And the reshift from being one with God, from being in the energetic presence of God, of Source, in my divine presence and in that state of complete, unlimited, omnipotent power and presence, to then go back into the body. It was this kind of sudden reshifting feeling. And it was also a longing feeling where I longed to stay with Source, to stay with Archangel Michael, to stay with my grandmother. It felt jarring and it felt abrupt. And so I just cried and cried and cried and cried. At some point, I went to sleep. And the next day, I still had the asthma. They had worked on my mind and my body and my soul, but I was still experiencing asthma. And so I did go to the hospital that day, and I wondered what was going to happen with the visitations, because they had said they would come to me for these 3 nights, these 3 days. And when I was in the hospital, I was up all night being poked and prodded, and they didn't come. And so it was that day after that, in the middle of the night, the same thing happened. And they came over my body and they started to breathe into my body. And there wasn't as much conversation at that time. It was more just an energetic healing of my body. And then on the 3rd night, in the middle of the night, I woke up to kind of a robotic voice that sounded like it was coming from outside of it wasn't telepathic, thought transfer. That was how they seemed to communicate before. This was an actual voice in my room outside of myself, and it sounded very robotic, and it just said my name. It said Amber Baker, and then a snap. And I was, wow, what is this? And I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And I was, kind of half asleep. I realized that was the rebirth. It was a complete activation of my divine presence. And that after this experience, I knew I wasn't the same person. I knew that something inside of me shifted. Now, it didn't explain or say everything, but some of the other things that they had told me was that I am a healer, that I'm going to write books, that I am to spread this mission and help others activate their divine presence, and that is my purpose. Really, it's all of our purpose in life, is to awaken within our true essence, which is divine, and that we are all unlimited possibilities. We are all unlimited in presence. We are not defined by our thoughts and feelings. We are unlimited in potential. After that experience, I knew I was changed. I felt like I had been living my life like this, just so limited. I felt that I was living my life, and I knew that I was living my life defining myself based on what was happening to me and not for me. I knew that I was operating in a very narrow, limited sense of consciousness, like in a box. And then after this experience and my divine presence was awakened, I tapped into this energetic vortex of energy, and everything about me felt new. Everything about me, I felt excited. I felt like I wanted to share my light. I wanted to help other people. I wanted to serve other people. I wanted to go fully into this spiritual awakening that I had based on this experience. I also had the complete activation of my senses. My 3rd eye opened. I was able to see things and hear things on a heightened level. I had always communicated with spirit my whole life. Since then, my life has really changed for the better. I do work now as a medium, as a spiritual healer and mentor. I'm so grateful for this experience. I feel it has been a gift in my life, and I love sharing about this with other people. I really hope that source, that God, the divine realm, and that the spirit world looks at me as a conduit, as a messenger of light, as a messenger for the soul, as a messenger for spirit. And that's my mission now, is to be a channel for source, and to be a channel to help other people just always tap in to who they are without limitations, because that is who we are. That is our true essence, and that we are not meant to live our lives small and to dim our lights. That is not at all where we are evolving to as a collective. So that is my near-death experience, and thank you for listening.